right. Hey, Eric, how you doing?
How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing great, doing great. This is definitely just a weird time. I'm pretty sure almost everyone watching this is gonna know who you are, but you want to introduce yourself? Give us a little bit about your resume.
Sure. Well, in terms of Milpitas, where the city where you and I both live, I'm the co-owner of a local newspaper called the Milpitas Beat, and I do all the editing. I write the occasional editorial. I do news reporting. Company founded by my brilliant wife, Rhoda. I'm also an author, filmmaker. I released a couple books this past year. Well, a novel called Red Dennis, a nonfiction book called Ask Plus Seat, which is tips to help writers not procrastinate and get their work done. And like yourself, like you said, it's a weird time. So we're looking at smoky skies out the windows. We can't really go outdoors today, or at least the advisement is to stay away from it and just like totally hunkered down and sheltered at the moment. But I think this weekend they're saying the wind's going to clear it out.
Oh, yeah, let's hope so.
Let's hope so. I'm reaching the point where like I was literally with the sheltering, for 5 months or whatever it's been. Now I guess we're into 6 months. Like I was really okay. Like, and I'm not a person that's unfamiliar with anxiety, but with COVID, I was like, it's scary, it's unsettling and unnerving, but we're adjusting, we get through it. You get through it day by day. But it was really the loss of the ability to just go outside and take a walk, or even just go sit in the backyard. Like I really, this past, like, it's been like 3 or 4 weeks now where it's been very unstable heat or air quality or smokiness or rolling blackouts. Like, and it's just really, I'm getting to the point where it's like, wait, can't we just have 3 relatively normal days? And by normal, like, just pandemic days, like I'll just take the pandemic at this point, because the smoke is so uncomfortable.
Well, when the pandemic started and shelter in place started, it was a scary time for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because, everyone was just like, I'm an hourly worker. What am I going to do? I can't pay the bills. But for
Yeah.
those who didn't have to worry as much, it was almost like a little vacation.
Yeah,
which was
exactly.
super
Yeah.
weird.
You hit the nail on the head. What was interesting is because I've worked from home. It's now 2020, so I've worked from home for like 19 years, like most of my adult life. Like, a couple years out of college, I started working from home. I didn't realize until the pandemic, like what that means in terms of socioeconomic status. Like when you work from home, there's so many boxes you have checked and you might not be aware of it. Like in terms of you probably have a specialized or customizable skill. You're probably at a certain income level. You're probably entrepreneurial. And it's not like I ever took those things for granted. I mean, I love running my own business and being independent, but I didn't realize, like, as you were saying, like somebody that's on an hourly schedule or an employee or on payroll, it's just they got completely upended. And there's a certain amount of continuity when you're not in that world, because it's like, all right, now I'm still here doing my thing. Probably I've lost a couple clients or whatever it's been, but the only real difference is my days are more standardized. Like there's less variety. Like at a certain point in the day, like late afternoon when my work is done, there's like less choices. I have less people I can go and see. We're not going to go on a trip over the weekend, things like that. Although people are traveling more and more. So, but it definitely is an upside down time.
Well, actually, what's fascinating about what you said is my situation is kind of the opposite. And
Okay.
so, a lot of people who have a specialized skill, or like yourself, you're still making money during this time. I have a good friend who's a cinematographer slash. I had a podcast with him. His name's MJ. You know of him.
Oh, I know him. He's a great guy.
But he doesn't describe himself as a cinematographer. He's like kind of a business consultant almost. Like, yeah, he'll make you a video, but he'll be like, okay, let's do something to like promote your brand or like advance your brand, not just make a video. And so, he'll be like, I know you want this, but I think this will help your brand a lot more. But so he's actually gotten a lot of work. You've got a lot of work.
Yeah.
Or I assume you got a good amount of work to where you can pay the bills. For me, it's been very different. Almost all of my gig work has just kind of went out the window. But my hourly job stepped up and said, hey, throughout this whole time, we're going to pay you for your approved amount of hours. I'm approved for 40 hours at that place. And they said, we're going to pay you for your 40 hours. Work from home if you can. And if you can't, and you do have to come in, we're just going to pay. So it's like they put me on salary right as the pandemic hit. And so just to make sure. yeah, just to kind of make sure that I'm able to pay the bills. I'm not going hungry and all this. And so my income through this pandemic has come from my full time job.
Oh,
Even
interesting. Yeah.
though at the start of the pandemic I wasn't working at all, and then now I'm still on reduced hours, but
Okay.
they kind of put me on salary, and the rest of the staff too. It wasn't just me; they did it for the whole staff.
Oh, good stuff. Yeah, that's ironic. I mean, that is, like you said, it's kind of the inverse of what a lot of people are dealing with. And it really varies to the extreme with situations. Like a dear friend of mine in New York whose income is all tied up, and he does really well. It's in the movie and TV industry. He's, there's an existential threat now because so many productions are shut down. I guess now they're saying productions are coming back, but it's only a handful that have actually come back. And for there to be a real market for what he does, it's better if there's a couple hundred shows at once. Then it's like, all right, this show didn't work out, or this one got interrupted, but I can pivot to that show, and then he can really play the game. But if there's only a few, it really hasn't returned. And then it's a question of like being in an expensive New York apartment, dumping rent into it, and we see that here locally, and it's mind blowing. And like you said, what's interesting is I've been a ghostwriter for a lot of my adult life prior to getting more involved in the newspaper in the past couple of years. And I was kind of thick. I didn't think about it, but suddenly a lot of my past clients started looking for me for books and manuscripts and things because they're at home. They have ideas. The ideas are coming. They're like, I may as well get a project done, but they can't. Maybe they have good ideas or whatnot. Maybe they have talent or skill, but since they're my clients, they're the type that are looking for a ghostwriter to collaborate with at a minimum, or to outsource it to me at a maximum to get it done. So I'm like, I'm like a tool in their kit to get the project done. And I started hearing those calls, which is confusing because it's an industry I spent a long time getting out of. I was really burned out a bunch of times over. And so I did it from 2002 to the end of 2018, full-time, often 7 days a week. And I would often get burned out. And it was disturbing the past few years. Like I would get burned out, then I would never quite heal from it or snap out from it. But some months would go by. And then I'd realize I'm getting burned out again. Like it would never lift. And it was just like that. So ghostwriting was not something I wanted to stay consistent with or have continuity with. But in the middle of the pandemic with a potential depression, whether it's official or not, or we're really in it or it's coming or whatever you want to call it, a vaccine could preempt it. But since the future is so uncertain, I've been saying yes to it more lately. As people have projects. And, I kind of had a good couple of years there where I had the luxury of saying no. And I don't, knock on wood, I don't urgently need it. But like, on the other hand, since, like I said, I'm inside more hours than usual, like I can do the projects and I can sock the money away. And it's probably a good idea because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one thing for me that's been interesting is there's actually a couple clients, so when the pandemic hit, my income was kind of like slashed in half,
Okay.
Just because I was just getting income from my hourly, job and not from anywhere else. But what's interesting is lately, since I've been kind of readjusting, because at the beginning I was just like, oh, I'm going to say yes to those jobs, even if I don't want them, just to kind of build up the savings account. But lately I was just kind of like, I feel like I can say no to a few of these, which has been really interesting because it's like I've adjusted to living on less income.
Yeah.
But
your needs change.
Yeah, and I guess I kind of carry that through because I'm no stranger to saying no to a job that I don't want. There's certain clients I have that I'm just like, well, I'll kind of do anything for them because they're good people. But there's been a couple where it's just like, it's either like, I've taken jobs that don't pay well because it could lead to something more, and I've also rejected jobs. But I feel like now, that I've kind of settled into this new normal right now, I'm kind of feel like I can say no to certain jobs that I don't want, which is always liberating. It's always kind of liberating.
That is interesting too, in terms of the new normal. Like a big part of it too, when you do gig work and you do projects and it's sort of a productive type of job, is the since the outlook during COVID is so marked by uncertainty, the whole idea of productivity in and of itself has become a little suspect. Like, I think people that are creative, whether it's vocationally or artistically or both, are sort of in a mindset of like, wait, why? You kind of have to push yourself to do it a little more than usual because the existential overall outlook is just uncertain. So it does lead to sort of a difference in tempo and temperament. But you learned the lesson a lot younger than I did. Like for years with the ghostwriting, I scarcely said no to anything. Like I would say no if they were below my minimum rate. It just wasn't a functional deal. But generally, it was like yes, yes, yes across the board. Being a good sport. Just glutting the schedule, always overbooked, and I felt comfortable having more than I could handle because I knew, okay, if this job craps out or if this stalls, I have 3 other ones I'm doing. And for years with my ghostwriting partnership, it was myself and my partner Michael that were doing it. He was marketing and I was the production and sales and customer service end. For years, it was probably 25 or 30 projects at a time on the schedule, mostly speeches, but always like a handful of screenplays, books. And it was really just majorly productivity. I gained a lot of weight. Like I was always strapped to a chair. And it is good. It's a good habit that my wife and I have both been learning in the past few years to just be able to say no. Like it's, I think the fear when you do it is you're going to miss an opportunity or you're going to burn a relationship. But it's actually the opposite. 9 times out of 10, the people you say no to will find you more desirable. They'll come back and try again. And, it'll give you more mystique. It'll give you more standing. So good for you that you learned that at a young age.
Well, it wasn't easy, a lot of, and what's interesting is I've noticed the same thing I'm about to say with a lot of people my age, but we grew up as people pleasers. And so, we learned that, it's like the whole, like whenever your parents say something, you don't talk back, you say, yes, I'd be happy to, we kind of grew up as people pleasers. And it's really hard for us to say no, which is another reason why a lot of people my age, we work 50-hour weeks.
Right.
We're a slave to our bosses because, we don't know how to say no. We don't know, or, like in my case, I slip into this all the time. I do a lot of different things when it comes to the city of Milpitas or, my own company that, as I started this year, or my full-time job or, other properties that, I help manage or anything. It's like, I can't say, it's hard to say no. I'm not going to say I can because I can, but it's hard to say no. And so a lot of people my age just end up burning ourselves out by work because it's hard to say no. And it wasn't until actually the pandemic when I kind of slowed down a lot. Because, before the pandemic, I was working 100 to 110 hour weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was normal, 18-hour days. That was a normal thing. And of course, I'm counting school in that as well.
Sure.
Because to me, school is a job that I pay to work instead of being paid to work.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, it pays dividends in the future.
Yeah. Let's debate.
Maybe. Yeah.
I'm going to school because I find I'm studying administration of justice, which is like sociology, criminal justice put together.
Oh, well, yeah, you were telling me about that. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And to me, it's just really interesting, which is why I'm kind of doing it. But yeah, I don't know. It's just it's very strange. I lost where I was going with this, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah, we were talking about the value of saying no. Your generation.
Oh yeah.
Like,
there we go.
Agreeable. Yeah.
There you go. This happens.
It's funny it happened to you. I could have sworn it was going to happen to me that I'd lose my train of thought. I'm sure I will next. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. So, little precursor to people watching. Me and Eric,
Sure.
we're good friends. And we work together sometimes. Because we have skills that complement each other quite a bit. And so we do. And so sometimes we'll get into a conversation and it'll spiral completely out of control.
Oh yeah. Next thing you know, the sun has gone down. It's like, okay, it's everybody's gone to bed and we're still talking. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And oh man, I can't even, how many times have I gotten like a voice memo or like a text from you at like midnight or 1? I remember
totally,
I used to send you certain projects or files at like 2 a.m. and I'd be like, oh, you can see this when you wake up. And then I'd get a response like, oh, cool, I just watched it. And I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah. Our voice memo game is pretty good too. Like I'll send you 30 seconds. You'll send me a minute. I'll send you 3 minutes. And then we just have an entire conversation.
But yeah, so my generation, it's it tends to be hard to say no just because of kind of the way we were raised and kind of what we learned in school, and the kind of I'm not throwing shade at you, but actually no, your kids are young, so you
What
don't have any kids
generation are
my
they
age.
in? Yeah,
They're
you're
Gen
a
Z.
millennial. Are they Gen Z? Yeah, and then
Yeah.
I'm Gen X, which is different. I mean, Gen X is more like ambivalent, ambiguity, darkness, like cynicism. Also very entrepreneurial, which I think a lot of millennials are too. Like you guys have a totally different economy you're coming up in than the one we were. I came up in an economy that's not too dissimilar from yours, but the one we were geared to expect when younger was drastically different. So we sort of got dropped in this 21st century economy and then have had to swerve into it. But I'm not sure about Gen Xers as my generation. That's an interesting topic, agreeability, because I am a pretty agreeable person. Something my brother-in-law Stanley, Rhoda's brother Stanley Jordan, who's a jazz guitarist. So any jazz fan listeners might know who that is. He taught me a long time ago, and this was life-changing, about matchers and mismatchers. Like a matcher is somebody you say, oh, it's a little bit, it's kind of chilly in here, isn't it? They go, yeah, I am kind of cold. And a mismatcher will be like, what? I'm warm. It's a neurological difference. And I think the majority of the population is matchers, and mismatchers are known for being kind of difficult, but they don't mean to be. It's just the way their wiring is. And whenever you're dealing with one, which is a lot of work for me, I guess the best thing to do is to always give them two options. Like, should we do it this way or should we do it that way? And as long as you're happy with both options, because of their brain wiring, they're predisposed to choose one path or the other. So it's like you're able to manage the interchange of ideas. But I've always been a matcher. And people don't think I am. Like, they don't expect me to be, because in my writing, it's not like I'm a mismatcher in my writing, but in my writing, it's, it's a solo act. It's my voice. It's about my perspective. So it's a time to sort of just like, without any interplay or dialectic, it's like, all right, here's what I think, sort of thing, or here's where I'm coming from. But in my interpersonal relationships, I'm really agreeable. I mean, we've worked on a production where I've been the producer, director, writer. I think as a director, I'm pretty flexible. Like, I always want everybody to be creative. I bring in good people. Like, I want your ideas to blossom and flourish. And on the production we did, Dish Pig, we had a lot of performers improvising, and it was kind of like a free-for-all, which is the energy I thrive on. Yeah, and so agreeability
By the way,
is an interesting thing. Yeah.
Real quick, that was such a fun set to be on.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was. That was a really good one. And we got, just if we can play the violins for ourselves. We got interrupted because we were supposed to go shoot 3 more episodes, and then COVID came. So we're here doing this. Yeah. So, and then I had another little series called Heavy that was supposed to do the same thing, which we would have worked on together also, and everything got shelved. And we keep saying 2021, but who knows? I mean, we'll see what it looks like.
Yeah, and this is something I'm actually interested to get your opinion on, because it's going to come to a point where it's going to be like, how much of a risk do you want to take? Because, like, for instance, my friend MJ, he's still doing shoots, and it's fine because, they're either outdoor or they're in counties that allow it or whatever, and he's getting tested after every job. He's been tested more times than I have.
Wow.
And I think right before we started recording, I told you I've been tested like 6 times.
Amazing.
And I did an in-person podcast with him, but I was a little scared to post it because I don't think everyone would understand. Like, me and him were both tested like right before that. Oh,
right, the context.
We even had masks on until we hit the record button.
Mm-hmm.
We were a little close together. And it was indoor, but we were separate, and we weren't face to face, so we weren't shooting germs at each other.
Right.
But we were both tested before that. But I think it's going to come down to is like, how much of a risk do you want to take? Because this COVID situation is not going away anytime soon. And even when the vaccine comes out, it's going to be prioritized for frontline workers, people in hospitals, first responders. It's not going to get to normal people, normal, we're not normal, but normal people like me and you. It's not going to get to us for a while. And so it's going to be like, okay, well, if maybe we make a prerequisite that if we were to go on set, everyone has to be tested before.
Right.
You have to wear a mask unless you're on camera or whatever the case may be, social distance, all the normal guidelines and such. And it's going to come to a point where you just can't really wait for COVID to be over, because, this COVID-19 virus is going to be around. I mean, realistically, it's going to be around forever. The black plague just came up
be a factor
in California. It's just gonna be a matter of how many people are vaccinated, and herd immunity, vaccinations, all that.
It has to kind of spread itself around through the course of time in terms of herd immunity. I think the way you just described it is very sober and on point. I mean, there's a lot of a media drumbeat about the vaccine. It's reasonable to think there will be one. I think based on the, is it the biochemistry, just the nature of the virus itself. Like HIV, I think was shaped kind of like a corkscrew. Like it was a very complicated virus. So once it got in your system, it really just wrenched itself in there, and it was just like very hard to work with. From what I understand, COVID-19 is just more like a little hook. So there's more of I think there's just more biochemical ways to work against it. So it's great, Operation Warp Speed, like all this pressure that's being put on developing a vaccine. I'm super hopeful for one. I mean, I constantly read about vaccines in the news, and I'm trying to be up to date. I try and be hopeful when I hear there's going to be one. But like you said, even when one comes, there's the frontline workers get it first. There's the logistics of distribution. There's going to be surprises in terms of side effects and in terms of how effective it is, how many times people have to take it. This is going to be a huge learning curve. And I think the way you're describing production is right on point, in the sense that see, here I go being agreeable again. You'll say something, I'll just say it back to you. But that show on HBO, Euphoria, with Zendaya, which is an awesome show. So they got interrupted by COVID. So the showrunner, writer-director, showrunner Sam Levinson, filmmaker Barry Levinson's son, they went and popped off. I think it was up in Monterey, a little movie. Just it took them 3 weeks, and he wrote the script really quickly in a week, and Zendaya was willing to be in it because they were already working together. So you got her, she's a star, they'll make their money back. And they probably had about 20 people on their crew, and it was within the parameters you're describing. You're pretty much in this environment, you're probably it's probably a good idea to go into one location, and or not just one location like a house, but one expanse of land. Like the series Yellowstone was scarcely interrupted because they shoot on a ranch. So as long as everybody was tested and quarantined before they came into the ranch, it was fine, and they were able to continue shooting their season. I mean, it's boring because people can't go out drinking at night, and it becomes dull work. But aside from that, at least they're able to sustain and survive. So Sam Levinson, I think his movie took place in a house or a couple houses. Everybody gets tested. At that level of the industry and budget, I think everybody got tested, quarantined for 2 weeks, then they shot. Everybody, went back into quarantine for 2 weeks, then back into the world. But I keep thinking if and when, more when than if, I hope, we shoot an indie production, it has to be all right, the location is kind of isolated, to some extent, it's not in the mix of everything. I don't think we could do at the indie budget level or super indie. I don't think we could do the 2 week quarantine, but just make sure everybody that sets foot in there is tested. And that's really the best you can do. And it's kind of it's a hassle to even do that, when you have a lot of logistics and bodies, but I don't see any other alternative unless the vaccine is in such a state of widespread distribution and the numbers are so going down. And by then there's also X amount of treatments that are really dependable, and it's just become a manageable thing, and it's not a headline anymore, then maybe you can go shoot something and not have to think about it. But we'll find out. Yeah, shooting movies, pandemic, it's crazy. It's totally upside down. I mean, I hope it's hard to be optimistic too. I feel like a lot of the type of news we've been getting across many areas of life has just been has not given a lot of reason to be hopeful for a while. So hopefully that pendulum swings sooner than later. I don't know what to say. A lot of people are pinning their hope on partisan politics. When Biden gets in, everything will be better. But it's we're in such a divisive, vitriolic, tribal culture war that, it's since we can all hear each other talking on social media, I don't see what can come in and soothe that. I mean, it's we're in this state of cold civil war that gets hot at times, like in Oregon and so forth, and when people are murdered. And now, I think the virus is creating these this economic and sort of visceral sense of just uncertainty that is just making people lash out. And what we're feeling on the inside is sort of reflected on the outside. It's quantum physics in the sense is like, there's so much inner adjustment and reckoning with ourselves. And then, literally the outside is on fire. And this is just what we're in. I mean, it's completely mind blowing. And, I had developed a good tempo and rhythm of life in terms of like, all right, I break up the day with a walk, usually in the late afternoon, probably another one after dinner. And just, there's only so many things you can do in general. If you are inclined to be more of a sheltering temperament, you're not going to take your chances. But these fires have really, like, I'm so climbing the walls right now. Like, I just please just let me go sit outside and make a phone call. Like, I can't do it. So, yeah.
Well, I remember a couple days ago we had just a completely orange sky. And I remember I text you and I'm just like, who let Quentin Tarantino be in charge of the color grading of the world right now?
Yeah, that was hilarious.
It looked like a Kill Bill movie outside.
It was like a Kill Bill movie. It was like a Robert Richardson cinematography. Your colleague on the planning commission, Bill Chwan, texted me also, Happy Halloween. Yeah, it was like, it was unbelievable. It was really, that was actually, I said to Rhoda, my wife, when that day was ending, like when the kids were in bed, it was like, after 10 o'clock and everything. I said to her, you know what, even though this wasn't, it was ironic because the paradox was the air quality was okay that day. Because we had, what is it called? A marine shelf? I forgot what it's called. Wrote about it.
It's a marine layer. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You were one of the first people to tell me about it. You were texting me. So the marine layer was like Tupperware, I guess. It keeps the air sealed in. So we actually had a moderate day. I'm so addicted to my walks. Like I grab one anytime I can get. They're a big part of my schedule. But I just, like, it wasn't even fear. It just made no cognitive sense to go out there and walk when the world looked like that. I'm like, how could you go out and enjoy a walk? This is like so utterly disturbing. It was just glaring. There was just something deeply unsettling about it. So at the end of that day, I said to her, I was like, even though there was no air danger, even though the fire that was near us is contained, the STU lightning complex, the one that was the closest threat to Milpitas, is like virtually contained now. I was like, this is one of the worst days I've had this year. It's just like, that was just such a bummer. Like, so weird. Like the sun never came up. It's just like that does something to the human mind.
Yeah, I was more just like, all right, when are the zombies coming?
yeah. Seriously, what's next? Yeah.
And everyone says like, oh man, it's just 2020 can't get any worse, and please stop saying that.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Every time you say that, it wants to prove you wrong.
Yeah, there's that. You're absolutely right. That's the energy of it, and it's also the other thing is like, people, when they say the words 2020, it's wishful thinking. This is not like, this stuff we're dealing with is indifferent to the calendar. Like, especially the virus. Like the virus is not on a schedule unless you want to opt into a sort of a QAnon conspiracy where it's like, all right, after the election and Biden wins, then we'll stop hearing about it. It's like, then they'll stop running headlines and the virus will go away from mass consciousness. But no, I mean, it's a real thing that kills people. I mean, it's here. It'll probably be into 2021. And it's just it's a disaster. I mean, my biggest saving grace is I have two young kids, as you said. I mean, one's about to be 6, the other just turned 9. And it's very comforting to know that cases at their age are rare. And that, mortality at that age is even rarer, even though you do hear about them. So that's huge, because that added pressure of like having to, of course we're keeping them safe, but having to worry about that with them, it's not there. I mean, basically if you're 20 or younger, it's not there. I mean, there's been no cases reported in Santa Clara County of anybody younger than 20, which is so that's a saving grace. I mean, I'm 42, so I mean,
has there really been no cases of people under 20?
Every time I look at the dashboard, it says like case percentage, like from 0 to 20, it's always 0%. It's always,
Interesting, because I know quite a few.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, carriers. I know quite a few people my age who have been tested positive.
Yeah, and you're how old? You're 25 or?
I'm 25. Yeah.
Yes, I mean it happens, and at 42, I feel relatively stable. I'm in a column. With each ascending decade, it's more of a danger to you. And I was in, my body mass index was above 30 when this started. I was in the obesity zone. I think I might still technically be in it, and somewhere in the 20s. I don't know what the cutoff is, but I'm just determined, like, all right, if this thing gets me, it's not going to be obesity that's a contributing factor to my mortality, because that can make a huge difference. And it's just it's just like, it's totally warped. I mean, I have days where I just go out to the edge of the consciousness of like, I just can't believe this is happening. Like, yeah. And And I think part of the fires, what's happened to a lot of people in California, is there was at least within the abnormalcy and the instability, there was at least something of a tempo to it for most people. Like, I'm not saying it was settled or situated. You have people losing jobs and income and homes and so forth. Not to mention people that are dealing with sickness and death. So I'm not saying it was in any way stable, but at least in and of itself around COVID, you understand the rules with masks and hand washing and social distancing. And there's a certain, certain over.
Some people understand the rules.
Well, some people do, right? At least, yeah, right. But at least it's like, right, this is the isness of now. This is the status quo. But then you add the, we're like quadruple decker in it. Like, it's like, it was heat, then it was fires, then you got smoke as a result of fires, whether or not the fire is a real threat to you and your neighborhood or whatnot. And then we had blackouts. Mm-hmm. So it's like, and it's like to be in a mind where it's like, just get me back to the regularly scheduled pandemic is like, that's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we just go back to like just COVID, please?
Yeah.
No, what's crazy?
Yeah, exactly.
I was packing ready to evacuate because I wasn't in the evacuation zone.
Okay.
But the evacuation zone ended right next to me.
Oh, like, yeah, I was aware of that. Yeah, looking at the maps. Yeah, you were right over there. Yeah, in the on the eastern end. Yeah.
There was one little section that went down all the way to the main road that's next to me. And,
unbelievable.
Yeah, and I just happened to be right next to that one little section.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I'm trying not to give away where I live, but I'm pretty sure anyone who wants to could figure it out at this point.
Yeah.
At least we had
our bags were packed by the doors for 3 days, and we're not as close to the eastern edge of the city as you guys, but it's still that one when you're in that potential evacuation place, it's real hair trigger way to live. It's like, all right, it's like, then I have people on the East Coast recommending TV shows I can binge on. I'm like, I'm not watching anything. I'm staring at the wall right now. Like, I'm just like,
I'm going to watch a mixture of Twilight Zone and Black Mirror because
you're right. Exactly. That's all.
That's it.
Just something you can relate to. Yeah.
Exactly, man. It's I think one of the funniest things I've been seeing people say is like, man, this new episode of Black Mirror is super realistic.
That is, you're not kidding. Yeah, it's like because the words "this is surreal" are like I've heard that come off of so many pairs of lips. Like, it's just like, reality is surreal on so many levels. Like even again, with myself being of a different generation, like in terms of the economy swerving and technology swerving, like the internet itself, smartphones themselves, and just just all those changes have so drastically altered the way people think. And it's just amazing seeing my kids come into the world and they're instantly very comfortable with that sort of stuff. And it's just like, I feel like what's happening lately is just more compounded changes.
When you say compounded changes, are you talking like, first we have COVID, then we have this, then we have that, then we have this, and it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just a complete rewiring of the way we think, the way we live, our expectations, like economically, technologically, biologically. It's just, it's all.
If you think about it, that actually makes it easier because it's not like we're hit with fires, evacuation, smoke, COVID. Social unrest, civil rights movement, all that. We're not hit with all this stuff at the exact same time because most people would not be able to handle that. But it's like, you put the frog in the boiling pot. You don't throw the frog in the pot while the water's boiling because they'll jump right out. You put it in when the water's room temperature, and then you slowly turn up the heat. That's kind of how it is right now, and it kind of makes it a little easier because it's like, okay, COVID hit, shelter in place hit, okay, once we got acclimated to that, then the next thing hits, and then all of a sudden we have murder hornets, and then all of a sudden we have wildfires, and then all of a sudden we have protests, and then everyone forgets about COVID and they go to protests, and which is such an interesting dynamic when it comes to COVID, because I went to a couple protests in San Jose, Fremont, and Milpitas. I went to a few, and it was very interesting because everyone there was wearing their mask. Nobody was close to each other, and but even then, I expected to see some spikes in COVID cases, and there's your normal spikes, but there was not there wasn't like thousands within one day.
That's an interesting one. Also, I mean, they're outdoors too. I mean, I think that's a big the outdoors and the masking are pretty big variables. But at the moment when the protests were happening, I went to a couple that were both in Milpitas, for the newspaper, and those were two of the bigger outings I've done in the past few months, just in terms of getting the coverage. And but in the moments when they were happening, there was uncertainty. It's like, wait, what are we doing here? But there was a big like communal psychic need also to get out and like, yeah.
Well, it's interesting, and the protests are very political and controversial, depending on who you talk to.
Sure.
I don't think anyone condones burning down buildings, but and this is probably the most controversial stance I have on something right now.
Okay.
What I'm about to say.
Okay.
Who knows? I might get canceled for this, but it's okay.
Oh, go for it. Go for
it. But it's okay. I'll just get canceled by the alt-right, so it's all good.
Yeah. Oh, good. Okay.
So the thing is, I don't think anyone is condoning all the rioting and looting and the property damage and stuff that's been going on.
Sure.
But I understand. I understand why. I get it. Like people are so this is not a new issue, and people are just so sick and tired of it. And what's interesting is the point of view with these protests that turn into riots is people are saying like, oh, your whole movement is trash because all it did was lead to property damage. And then those people are basically saying, whether they mean it or not, because you can say something and people interpret it one way, and you can say something and mean something completely different. But what you're basically saying is you care more about property damage than you care about the lives of people.
Right.
Which is such, and I, I don't think that everyone who's been, dismissing the protests because of property damage and stuff, I don't think they all think that, but that is what you're saying to people. Is
true.
You care more about property damage than you do about civil rights. And granted, things have gone a bit too far in some cases, but people are angry. And what's interesting is a lot of people are kind of sorry, I did a podcast about these protests and the whole movement not too long ago with a brilliant young mind who goes to MHS, and just I have a lot to say about all these protests and stuff. But the actual organization Black Lives Matter, you can there's probably some sketchy stuff going on with the official like nonprofit organization.
Sure.
But the movement is, in my opinion, is something very different than the organization.
Oh, agreed. And there's different. There's a handful of ways to define it. I mean, there's the words themselves, and there's an organization. There might be. Is there more than one organization? I can't even keep track. Like, and there's different alignments depending on where you're positioned within the organization or which aspect of it you're a part of. But in terms of, I'm aligned to you completely in terms of the central ethos of it, number one. Number two, most of the protests were nonviolent. I mean, the rioting was, I think, 5 to 7% of all of it. And number three, like what you're saying about, not to be cavalier about rioting or anything like that, but what you're saying about the juxtaposition between being more concerned about property versus human life is also part of what's motivating some of the rioting. Not to say that it's necessarily dignified, but it's also, that is part of the point. It is an act of radical protest or revolt on some level, which is not necessary. I mean, look, it's not something I go out and do. I'm not tranquil about it. I don't know if it leads in a good direction, but the fact is, with Black people in America, I'm married to a Black person. My children are part Black. I mean, I'm good long relationships for 23 years with all the members of her family, so on and so forth. I mean, you see all different stories and scenarios and situations, but in the aggregate, Black people get the short end of the stick in terms of income, in terms of home ownership, in terms of education, college education, in terms of incarceration, police apprehension, police violence, police mortality. I mean, just in proportion to, I think they're 14% of the U.S. population, and they're disproportionately hammered across all these measuring sticks of a comfortable life in America. You know, as white guys, when we get pulled over, it's stressful enough, but we don't have to worry that we might not live. I mean, a lot of white people get killed by the cops, and because most people are white. I mean, so I think statistically, the majority of people that are killed by police officers are white, but in the black community, it's disproportionately so. And I read a book, a really interesting fact in terms of how this all came to be. Like, there's a book I read, I think the author's name was Shane Bauer. It's called American Prison. And it just states very starkly, you know, when slavery ended, a lot of industries took a huge hit because, you know, their labor infrastructure was shattered. So as a result, you know, they had to take a look at the new laws, and the new laws said you can only enslave people, you can only incarcerate people and have them do free labor if they're guilty of a crime. So who was the pool of Americans that was easiest to pin crimes on, or just accused of crimes or whatever, were black people. And it continues to this day. It wasn't terribly long ago. Slavery was like half a dozen generations ago. So it's like, you know, so you're talking about like people's great-great-grandparents, et cetera. So all that gets passed down. A lot of descendants of slaves, you know, like I absolutely, as a Jewish person, believe, you know, trauma is passed down. Like, I think these things are legitimate. And the problem is, like, since before you and I were born, like, and I was born before you, I was born in 1978, there's been, for black people, if you look at their wages, they've been stagnant since the day I was born, since like 5 years before I was born. For decades, there's no wage growth among the black community. So that means not only have Republicans not helped them, but Democrats haven't helped them. Nobody has helped them. No policy, no like policy craft or you know, or any kind of solution, to the extent that you're even trying or pushing solutions. As you know, being in government, there's huge trial and error when you do politic and you regulate. You know, most of the time it's going to be bureaucratic inefficiency. But I'm on the left because I think it's worth trying. So I mean, but we have not given any alleviation to them. So when you say they're angry, you know, it is rightfully so. It is rightfully so. I mean, the way they have to live in this country, it's like an inhospitable environment. So and you really can only to a limited degree understand their anger if you're not in their community, you know. And I'm right flush up against the community. It's in my home, but still there are certain things, you know, as a white guy, despite the fact that I'm Jewish, I'm white, you know, I've always identified as white. There are still certain things that, as a white guy, a straight guy, a male, that are going to come more readily and easily. And I think there's been so much painful, ascendant, very like haphazard consciousness around this for the past 6 years or so in America, and we're just dealing with the growing pains, which are extraordinary.
Yeah, you know, you brought up so many interesting points, and you know, so one thing that always kind of bugs me is a lot of people are saying like, oh, well, you know, black neighborhoods have more crime, and they don't understand. Yeah, it's because they're over policed, and then that's a vicious cycle because a police chief will allocate more resources to a neighborhood that has a higher crime rate.
Absolutely.
But it has a higher, and it has a higher crime rate because it has been in the past over policed. And, you know, other neighborhoods have the exact same actual crime rate. But the thing is there's less resources in those neighborhoods to actually catch those people and report the crimes. And they're all in certain neighborhoods that need more resources.
Right.
And then that actually starts a cycle that affects people in general. And then, you know, it gets to a point where there are certain communities that actually realistically do have a higher crime rate because that's the situation they're put into. And it's a whole, you know, in one of my sociology classes, I learned all about this. And it's kind of amazing how we are a product of what we build. And, you know, how past generations have done things. And it's just insane because then you realize like a lot of the way things are right now didn't have to be this way, but they are because of human decisions, you know, and obviously, you know, the prime example is there didn't have to be slavery if we didn't.
Right. And we're still dealing
that type of slavery. There's other types of slavery, but we're talking about, you know,
the classic,
the classic African American slavery. That's the classic example of slavery didn't have to happen, but you know, Americans brought them over, and there's actually I've been learning a lot about actually how slavery happened too, and how England was involved, and even India was involved. Just a lot of different companies were involved to kind of make this happen. But it's just so it's really frustrating when you think about it, because as a single person, there's not a whole lot I can do. As like one person, there's not a whole lot I can do.
Sure.
You just look at these decisions like, this didn't have to happen. Even
it's amazing. Yeah, it's so true. And I love what you said also, in terms of like it becoming a self-perpetuating cycle. Like, the areas that have the most crime are over-policed, and then they're over-policed and crimes are being reported, and there's a kind of ongoing interplay between the police and the people. That movie, the first time I became conscious of how all this goes as a kid, there's the movie with Morgan Freeman, Lean on Me, where it's a true story. He's a school principal, and it was actually took place where I grew up in New Jersey. So he goes in, they send him in to clean up the school, and it's obviously a Black community. And he, one of his first complaints early in the movie is, I guess there are bars on the cafeteria windows. And he said, take those bars down, because if you treat them like animals, that's exactly how they'll behave. Yeah, and I was exactly. That was such a teachable thing for me as a kid. I think I was like 11 when I saw that. And it's like, wow, if you create like a police state, that cross-pollinating paranoia between the police and people is just never good. Like my friend, you met Rich, who was in Dish Pig. He played Chester, and he just said, speaking as a Black guy, he was like, when the police show up, we're not happy. It's like not like, oh, good, the police are here. It's like the opposite. It's like, oh, this could get a lot worse now. It's just part of their culture. And prior to social media, so many people were still in social media. A lot of us are still in our bubbles for sure, but we were so sealed off from each other. It's such culture shock to hear such a miscellany of voices across the political spectrum, because that now everybody has a literal microphone in front of them where they can say whatever they want. So it's like, we're hearing a lot of stuff that never had any media to give it a mouthpiece. And it's just like, it's a major adjustment that could, or possibly already is, leading to civil war. I mean, and like you said, very frustrating, like utterly avoidable, utterly an outgrowth of a lack of just civility, compassion, or selflessness. It's staggering.
What's interesting is when you really dig into the meat on systemic racism in the U.S., because I don't. You know what? There's people who say the U.S. isn't systemically racist. Shut up.
Oh,
yes,
my
it is.
God.
Well, anyone who says that the U.S. isn't systemically racist is just an idiot. Just shut up.
Oh yeah. No, you know what? It's so funny. But I put that, and I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that's utterly my perception of what's going on. What's so frustrating about having these sort of discussions with people is what you just said, and what I agree with. You can't pin it to a fact in the same way that you can say like grass is green, because it's such a confluence of different factors across different levels of how the justice system, the prison system, how it all operates. I mean, that's why I love that factoid from American Prison, just how it all started, because I'm always eager for like very, very precise, concrete sort of facts of policy you can pin this stuff to. Because if you read all the laws, like the penal code of every state in the United States, there are no racist laws. That's what conservatives love to say in response to the sentiment we're sharing. Like, of course, there are no racist laws. It's the same thing as patriarchy, which my wife has written a lot about and has educated me a lot about, and has opened my eyes about so much. I mean, I've as a ghostwriter running that company for years, I would always take her with me to meetings, and had uncountable experiences where something she said went unheard, or she would ask a question and the man would turn to me and answer. It's just like, and of course, people are rude, etc. There are variables to that sort of behavior, but I tend to perceive, just right next to systemic racism, I tend to perceive that there is a thing called patriarchy, but it's not, it doesn't exist in the realm of what was classically referred to as a fact. It is a theory. And like, so on both sides of the argument, everybody kind of needs to chill out about it, because like on our side of it, even what I just said, I'm sure would make certain people angry that it's not a fact, because they would say, no, my lived experience, it is a fact. And they would have every right to tell me 200 ways that it's been proven in their day-to-day life. And I totally understand that. But we on the left, what we've done a bad job of in the recent cycle, and Trump prays on it, is we get too emotional in the argument. and we get to like, oh, you can't see systemic racism. Like, what is the matter with you? You're blind. You know, it's like we get very expedient and we want the whole thing to be resolved immediately. But on the other side, then you have this trollish attitude that's like, well, systemic racism, I don't know. I can't see it. I don't know. Is that white privilege? I don't know. I don't know. I've never had it. Like, it's just like, and then everything becomes like a whataboutism and like an abstraction. It was like, you can argue each thing both ways. Somebody was just doing this to me on Facebook in the last 24 hours, just like trying to, in a net assessment, they were trying to make the argument that because there was at one point a prediction that 2 million Americans would die by summer, which was one of many predictions, by the way, that were bandied about. Because we've only hit 190,000 deaths, that like Trump basically deserves to be congratulated. Right. He basically deserves to be congratulated because he saved 2 million people. Right. And I was like, wait, what about the fact that he doesn't wear a mask? He throws these rallies.
Okay.
There were no answers. Yeah.
That's like if you walk into a store and you see something that you had no intention of buying on sale for 20%, you say, I saved $40 instead of I spent $80.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you should talk to my mother-in-law. That's how she does with discounts. Yeah.
No, I'm guilty of that. I do that all the time.
Yeah.
And my excuse is, well, I was probably gonna buy it at some point, so I just bought it now because of the discount. I saved money.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But
I totally hear you. Yeah.
And like, the more we get into the virus, the more just stupidly political it's gonna get. It's like it's been all but proven that a mask will help you prevent spreading it.
Oh my goodness!
It doesn't do much. Yeah. It doesn't do much to protect you, to be honest.
It's more of a.
It keeps your own germs in.
Yeah, it helps. It's like an honor system. If everybody keeps their own germs in the aggregate, that's how other people. Yeah, that's how it helps you. Yeah.
And people are just like, oh, I don't want to wear a mask because I don't care if I get the coronavirus. It's not about you, you stupid idiot. It's about the other person. Effort.
Yeah.
What if the person who's right next to who you're talking to or yelling at that and you don't have a mask? What if they like have some autoimmune disease and the second they get the coronavirus, it's like their body's done?
Yeah.
And you don't know that. It's not like people wear name tags saying like I have autoimmune disease, I have this, I have that.
Right. Well, exactly. It's just a common courtesy. It's just like driving the speed limit. Like the person that doesn't drive the speed limit is driving like a maniac is an a-hole. It's as simple as that. And I think what's going on, and I know it's like with Trump, it's such a dysfunctional, disturbing thing because it's so played out to complain about him, to criticize him, to make fun of him, because obviously it all bounces off him. Because his appeal, part of his appeal, his appeal is incredibly complicated, and it's something I'm fascinated in. Because I was so blindsided by his victory that I was like, all right, let me never be blind again. Let me just continuously educate myself about the mindset of those to whom he appeals. But one of the many pieces of what makes him appealing is that he does validate people's inner a-hole. Like he does, like he's like, it's okay. You can be a sex offender. You can say whatever you want. You can be a bully. You can be insulting. You can be a criminal. It's okay. Don't feel bad about yourself anymore. That's absolutely, it's the strongman thing. It's just.
Well, I just had an engagement on Twitter with someone else, and they're just like, how could Trump mess up the country this bad in 4 years? And my reply was, all he does is enable the system and the people that are already here.
Right.
Trump personally is probably not messing up a whole lot, like personally.
Right. His power is also limited. Yeah.
Yeah. What he does is he enables through his words and his actions all these different things. Do you remember when the protests were kind of first starting, and he says, when the protests and looting starts, the shooting starts? And then all of a sudden,
oh my God, of course,
the police aggression just grew so much after that. And even if they didn't realize it, they're just like, basically, police treating protesters terribly was now encouraged by the president. Like, what the? And then the thing is. And this is another reason why I completely understand why these protests are going AWOL, is because the second you show up to what could be a very peaceful protest in full riot gear, expecting things to go south, things are going to go south.
Like,
it's going to happen.
Spikes. Yeah. It's just,
the protest I went to, I noticed something, and I did a little experiment. What we did was really interesting. We marched right up to the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
And they met us with kind of half and half. Like, there were people there in full on riot gear, rubber bullet guns, all ready to act, but the people in the middle, in the center, they were just in their regular uniform, and they're just standing there. They weren't doing anything. They're statues, basically.
Right.
And so I noticed, like, okay, yeah, I see the people in the center. They're calm. They're not in riot gear. I feel a little bit better about what's going on. I'm gonna stay calm. Although I did notice the people on the sides, they had their riot gear, but they were also doing stuff like closing off streets so that no cars would, like, come and drive through the protests. It was for the driver's safety and for our safety. But I did a little experiment where I basically got as close to them as I could. I walked up and I just got as close to them as I could, and I stayed calm, and I wanted to see what they would do. And obviously nothing happened to me. I'm still here. I'm fine. But it was just so interesting because the sheriffs and I have a lot of issues with our sheriff's department. But one thing I can say is that they stayed calm. They didn't really do anything. They were ready, but the people who were up front and center were dressed normally, and that protest stayed very calm and peaceful. But then you see in other places where the protests, they start, and then all of a sudden they are met with almost a localized military, and it gets out of hand quick. That's the thing. It's like a lot of these protests didn't have to turn in. It's all avoidable. A lot of these protests didn't have to turn into riots, but when you're met with aggression, you're going to be aggressive back. If someone came up to you and they had an issue with you, and you knew they had an issue with you, they walk up to you and they say, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that you did something that I did not like at all, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention." You're going to be like, "Oh man, I'm sorry. Let's talk about it." But if someone came up to you and they pushed you, and then they, like, were just screaming at you, you're going to scream back.
There's absolutely. Yeah. And I can't speak to the county. I haven't had enough experiences. I've only lived up here for like 5 or 6 years, but living in LA for 14 years with the LAPD, there is absolutely, and I have some ghostwriting clients that are LAPD people. They're wonderful people. I've done speech writing, so I'm not painting them all with one brush, but there is absolutely a palpable antagonistic relationship between the police and the people they're supposed to be protecting. I mean, and that's in ordinary day-to-day life. Like, I remember living in an apartment that somebody had called the police for something, and I was probably about your age. I was like 24, 25, and I stepped out just to see if everything was all right, and I was met with such hostility. Like, I instantly thought I had done something wrong, and that was just a day-to-day, like, banal, ordinary encounter, let alone being organized in protests, let alone systemic racism. When you're marching, you're people of color, and you're in a culture where a huge piece of the systemic racism conundrum is that white cops, let me just say this very bluntly, I risk my own alt-right cancellation, like, they often perceive black people as a threat willy-nilly. They're ready to unload their cartridges into them because they're going to overreact because they see black people as, like, a source of mortal danger. So I mean, all of this is terrible.
And that has a lot to do with Hollywood, the media, a lot of that, and along with police officers training, because picture you're watching a movie and the camera pans over to a group of black people, like, all hanging out on a dark street with a broken street light. What happens next in that scene? It's never something good. And this is just an example of how systemic racism is just baked into the everyday life of America. Like, that's a normal thing. And personally, I have to admit, sorry to cut you off, I have to admit, like, I grew up, like, I have good parents who taught me everyone should be loved equally. I grew up in a Christian household, and that's a thing of, Not every Christian thinks that, but the
sure.
real Christians love everybody equally. The real
Oh, sure,
ones.
sure.
If you're a Christian and you hate if you hate gay people or you hate whatever trans people, then you're not a Christian. You're just a piece of crap.
You're not following Christ.
Yeah, you're not following Christ. You're just a piece of crap.
Right.
But you know, I grew up a certain way, but the thing is like even I had to untrain myself of when I see like a certain person like a piper, like they are just like me. And I'm very lucky that I trained myself at a very early age, and not everyone is that lucky.
Yeah, it's bold of you to admit that, for sure. I mean, it's absolutely a thing. I mean, and you know, an experience I remember, because we live in a very progressive part of the country, and you know, Milpitas has its own demographics that are specific to it, which are pretty. I mean, as white people, we're like an 18% minority here, so that's like the reverse of most of the country. So that's pretty amazing. But you go around the Bay Area, like, you know, San Francisco, even like, you know, San Jose, Fremont, whatnot. There's a tremendous amount of diversity. My son, so you know, my kids are multiracial, triracial. My younger son is brown, you know, which is interesting because he's a quarter black, but his preponderant skin color is brown, and he looks the same as his mother, who's half black, half Asian. And my older son Benny looks more white, and it was very fascinating just to see how that breaks. And I remember we were on a layover. We were flying cross country to see my parents, and we were in North Carolina, which is, you know, we were waiting for our next flight, as white as could be. And I'm definitely not. I've written a lot about this in the Beat. I'm so not one of those people that's like white people this, white people that, like, you know, wants to mock white people, or like, I don't think that's productive at all. Like, I'm thoroughly comfortable with the notion of white privilege. It doesn't scandalize me or, you know, get me ruffled or anything. Like, I think there's extreme legitimacy to it. But with all that in mind, so here we are in North Carolina, which is obviously, you know, very much a red state. And Henry, my son, was like, I guess 3 at the time, 3 or 4, and he's running around the airport. He's a little kid, you know, and I got to tell you, the looks he was getting from the old timers, like they were looking at him like he was an animal. And I didn't have an antagonistic mindset going into it, like I'm looking for some sort of racial based, you know, altercation or fight. Like, it was just like the looks were so openly like alarmed, disapproving. You know, this little brown kid is, you know, making noise and stuff, and like, you know, if he was a little white kid, they won't even hear him, you know, like but they're looking at him and he's little, you know, he can't hurt anybody, and they're acting like there's some big problem. And then they're looking at our multiracial family, which is a very unusual sight in that part of the world, and the same deal, like sort of like, oh boy, oh dear, you know. It's just like you said, baked into the cake. That's a very good way of putting it. Like, it's just an automatic sort of knee-jerk response. And I'm saying this, you know, from the white perspective vis-a-vis my family, which is a growing form of awareness day to day with being a father and so forth. But from their side of things, it's an ongoing factor. It's you know, from with people of color, this is just minute to minute, day to day crap they have to deal with.
Yeah, and one interesting thing is a lot of people are racist because of that's just how they grew up. They don't know different.
There's, you know, and they only most white people only socialize with other white people. It's like 94%. So it's like, what you don't know or have any, like, if you don't know somebody or know a way of life, or you don't owe them anything, or like they're not in your neighborhood, who cares? You know, if they're gay or trans, like, especially with trans people, like, which is such a human minority, it's like 1% of us. Like, the mentality among those people you're talking about who've grown up with it or are just blind to it is like, well, who cares? I'm going to hate them. I never have to look at them face to face. So I may as well just mock them and feel better about myself.
It's insane how many sociological issues are just kind of baked into society these days, because if it makes you feel better to mock someone who's different than you, like, that just opens the door to, like, what kind of issues do you have personally?
Oh, you're not kidding. And that it's interesting to go. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, like, you know, I've been studying sociology for years now, and which is one reason why I love doing this podcast, just getting so many different perspectives on things. But it's just interesting how, like, you can tell so much about someone. Like, someone who gets pleasure out of other people's pain is normally really messed up themselves.
Right. They're very interesting. Yeah. A good example. And it's interesting from the speaking of being canceled and everything, most of that comes from the left, right? That was mostly like far left, woke left, cancellation. And I always wonder, because it's such a thing. If you think about being gay, I have lost count of the amount of gay politicians or closeted politicians rather, that were so anti-gay in their policy points, and Republicans that were outed as being gay. I mean, it became like a trope.
So funny.
Yeah, it became almost automatically you're right to expect it. It's like, okay, this is a problem. Not even a problem. Like I feel bad that they would think it was a problem, but this is an issue they have unto themselves that they're struggling with, the issue of being closeted. And I always wonder, like, I got to tell you, whatever is going on with cancellation, the Me Too movement, whatever the motive is, and people pile on to another human being and shame them and outcast them, and they have pitchforks and this an online hate mob coming for somebody. I don't want to be friends with anybody that acts like that. Like, I don't like, it's like the comedian Bill Burr said, like, with that whole generation or that whole mentality, you're all a bunch of rats. Like, I just that's like, how could you, and you're just like Obama also said, like, the left, or not, he didn't say the left is eating itself. He said we're which is another line that's around, but Obama said we're a circular firing squad. It's like, yeah, how can you trust people that are, like you said, getting pleasure from pain is one gradient of this sort of antagonistic behavior. But whenever somebody is happily part of a mob, it's like, all right, we're going to shame and cancel and drag this person's name and, ruin their lives and take their job away. So it's like, I always immediately say to myself, like, what is that person hiding? Like, what is their shadow?
I have a different perspective on that than you, because I'm not going to lie. There is a portion of that, but when it comes to when it comes to cancel culture, I see it very similar to rioting and looting. The thing is everything is a pendulum. It's a certain way, some way for so long, and then when it finally swings, it goes immediately to the other side. And so the way I see like cancel culture, and that's gonna involve people being racist, the Me Too movement, being sexist, everything. Cancel culture,
being behind the curve,
includes all of that. So the reason why everyone is so hostile and so like, I will end your life, figuratively, I will end your career, your life, everything, is because those types of issues have been suppressed for so long. Women have been sexually abused and treated less and all this stuff for so long, and now they finally feel like they have the power to do something about it, and they are taking it to the complete other side. It's the same thing. Like, if someone wins the lottery, they go broke. Most of the time, and that's because if you're playing the lottery, you feel the need to get more money. Either that, or you feel very lucky, but you feel the need to get more money. So as soon as you get more money, it's like a pendulum, and you spend it all. It's the same thing. People, and I can't wait for the day that the pendulum kind of evens back, and kind of goes center, and people who deserve it, lose their career, but not everyone who doesn't say something right. But
that was very well said all the way around. Yeah, I was ready to start debating with you, but I see where you ended up with that. Like, in terms of you can't paint everybody with the same brush. Yeah, I was almost ready to come back with the Christ consciousnness. Despite being a Hebrew, I was gonna say, you do have to love everybody, and I do think it's a huge measure of not only society, but the individual, like how we treat the worst among us. Like, when that somebody's reprehensible, abhorrent, or a soldier of a reprehensible, abhorrent system, such as systemic racism or patriarchy, like how you treat them is such a measure of, you, of one and all, basically. And so it's like, it's not something, I'm not saying I holistically can't stand with it, because cancel culture has caught a couple really big whales on its hook. I mean, Harvey Weinstein deserves to be in prison. Bill Cosby deserves to be in prison. A lot of these a-holes deserve to lose their jobs. You have a lot of reprehensible people that were depending on the silence of other people. But on the other hand, not only are there people that abuse it, can abuse the metrics and the social media access and the microphones to pay, not just make stories up, because I do think that it's rare for that to happen. But again, it's painting people with the same brush. But like you said, that's because the pendulum is so extreme in the other way. There's a lot of suppressed, built up, unspoken animosity that finally has the light of day, which is a really, really healthy way of seeing it. My biggest concern about it, and this fits into your pendulum metaphor, is when you go hard like that and you play that sort of game, you create an inhospitable environment. Like you and I as straight white men have taken so much crap from our own side in recent years, you know, like, and you know, we've only actually, let me rephrase that to use the way you were putting it. We have only actually been able to hear it in recent years. It's been there for a longer time because of our ingrained leverage, privilege, advantages. And there's a legitimacy to the animosity because we do across many platforms of society have an easier go of it. The problem is like, so there's a difference between saying like a white male makes X amount more than a woman or, you know, black male or a black woman. And all that's true. And we have all those ingrained advantages. All of that is a fact. It's just that there's a difference between pointing that out and then like, you know, a white kid, or maybe he's not even a white kid, maybe he's not even verified confirmatively a white kid, shoots up a school, and then Twitter explodes with, you know, how are white men even able to exist? Oh my God, white men, you know, I hate all of them. And there's a lot of that in our culture. And then talk about a pendulum. What that does is it strengthens, emboldens, and organizes the right in a huge way. They have very justifiable grievances about being spoken of that way. They have a very justifiable distrust, you know what I mean? Like, well, I'm a white guy. Where do I feel safer? Do I want to hang with the left where, you know, I could get hit by the ideology and I'll have to hang in there? Or do I hang over there with Trump where it's like nobody's judging me for being white? And when that's the way that the culture is crafting the choice, because it is this pendulum of extremes, as you're saying, then we really do have sort of a warlike dialogue between us. So that's where I object to the train. I want to make clear also, it's funny, it's such a symptom of our cultural environment. And I know you already know this, and I spoke about patriarchy a couple of times. Like, I should make clear that the ethos, the values, the goals, objectives, and mindset of the Me Too movement is extraordinary. I mean, what the soil, the seeds it grows from, like you said, are long overdue. And I also know that the complicated paradox of the whole thing is when people like myself, who are not in the oppressed or disadvantaged end of things, start saying, well, I agree with the idea, but I don't agree with the approach. Usually that makes me a dinosaur. You know, historically, that makes people like me a dinosaur. I was like, I'm behind the curve. Because it's like, he's not up on, you know, he's like, all right, just simmer down a little bit. Stop talking so loud about it, but I agree with your ideas. And then the newer generation, younger people, the oppressed will look and be like, no, either you're with us or against us, which I understand. I just think that we're in a sort of technological weather system of social media all day, every day, where we all can hear each other politically all the time, around the clock. And there is that concern. Like, I think Trump is made of, consciously, not as a byproduct, but he consciously crafted his marketing, his persona, and his appeal to be an alternative to wokeness, to cancel culture, to you know, the circular firing squad. He's going to be a guy who's politically incorrect. He says whatever he wants. He's not ashamed of being white. All these things, and then he's really built a brand out of that. And we have failed on the left to build a counter brand. Our counter brand is Biden, who's a corporate moderate, and it's the same old story, just like Hillary, just like John Kerry. Not saying he's going to lose like those two. I have no idea, but we have yet to as radically establish a brand that is as appealing as his for his side. I think the left, the far left, is more alienating to a lot of people than what Trump has going on, which has an ability, even though the left is blind to it, it has an ability to bring independents and moderates into its fold. So it's dangerous. And it's a very, very tricky conversation. I feel like I'm also in a strange spot analyzing it because I am Jewish. So I'm part of a culture that was historically maligned, marginalized, enslaved, murdered. And, you know, that's all part of my ancestry, but I've also benefited from the fruits of white privilege. And I also don't look classically Jewish, so I've been able to pass a lot of my life as not Jewish, and in situations I've intentionally done so to get by, to close a deal, to not deal with judgment. So it's a mixed thing, and I accordingly, I have my own ideas about progress, assimilation, and it gets complicated, but I think you hear me.
Yeah. Oh man. You know, me and you could talk about this stuff for so long. Not just because it's me and you, but there's just so much to like, just to lay everything out on the table. That could take days. Of pure
really
talking,
could. Yeah,
like,
it's unbelievable.
72 hours of straight talking.
I'll have to come back.
Lay everything. Yeah.
I'm glad you took
it.
I'm glad you took it in this direction, because once you took it toward the current state of culture wars, politics, we both got very excited and inflamed and had a lot to say. So it's a very fertile topic.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's the thing is, I was talking to someone who was around my grandpa's age. He was an older person, And he said something that was very insightful, because there's just no way that everyone's going to agree on anything right now. But what he said really stuck with me. And I kind of wish more people kind of saw it this way, because as a younger person, I completely agree. He basically said, you know, I don't agree with anything of what these young people are saying right now. I don't agree with a single thing. But you know what? I don't have many years left on this earth. They do. So if they want to craft a country that's going to work for them and make them be successful and make them feel as accepted and successful as I did when I was young, more power to them. Like,
very well said.
I don't agree with any of it, but this is going to be their country soon. Let's let them, let's pass the torch. Let them.
I was going to say that. Yeah, that's very wise. I mean, I think that's part of getting older for anyone. Like, my generation definitely has trouble understanding yours. I mean, there's gaps in terms of economy, the economic situation you've come up in, technology, attitudes. Like, we came up in huge Reagan affluence and, a degree of cushiness and spoiled comfort, et cetera, that just led to certain ingrained forms of self-awareness. So there is a point to which it does pay to sort of sit back and be humble and be like, well, if this is the way it's going to be, like he said, you give it a whirl. And we're just also, I think everybody's in a fragile state because of the political state of affairs. Like, whether you see you're for Trump and you see him as a grand interrupter and a breath of fresh air and a guy that doesn't talk like a politician, or you're against him and you see him as a liar, a sociopath, and narcissist, which I think is the majority. I hope the majority goes out and votes. It's just, his presence is unnerving, and what it represents and what it carries into the conversation. Like you're saying, in his spot, he doesn't have as much of a policy lever as people perceive to actually influence our everyday lives. But him standing there not wearing a mask is super meaningful. Just things like that. His symbolic power, the power of his messaging.
Well, like I said, he enables groups of people and different systems and different organizations. He's an enabler.
Oh, absolutely, and all day, and he does it with intention, and it's often what I perceive to be malignant intention, sort of a preservationist mentality to sort of allow for the status quo and the toxic advantage to remain, which is, so it's utterly understandable that the left is losing its mind with him around. And we definitely, I don't know if Biden is the one. I think he's definitely would be a softer presence, but we need somebody, with the craft of language and symbolism and messaging to cool us, because this is like, I've been saying the words cold civil war now for like 4 or 5 years, but now with like, you hear the white guy gets shot in Oregon, and just not only the fact that he gets shot in the middle of protests or rioting, the way the press reports on it is kind of it's vague and elusive. It's like because the press is inclined to tilt left. So when an event like that occurs, and it's potentially a Black Lives Matter person that pulled the trigger, because of all the animosity, anger, justifiable rage you and I are talking about, the press is inclined to have a moment of pause, as opposed to a moment of outrage. And that sort of attitude makes the right incensed and makes them feel dehumanized. And I started thinking, like, is this an actual civil war now? Like, is this, Kyle Rittenhouse, was he one of the first soldiers in the war? Like, we'll find out.
Well, have you seen the stories and the rumors that Antifa was starting the wildfires in Oregon and California?
No.
Those were probably published for like less than a day. And then police and firefighters came out and were just like, "That is stupid. That is not what's going on."
Let me be very clear, since I was ambiguous at different points. It doesn't surprise me that there were rumors, not that Antifa. That's absurd. I mean, that's not what they're up to.
Yeah. Well, anyways, we've been talking for a while. I'm gonna cut this off now, but before we go, let's me and you kind of plug certain things that are coming up soon, and I want you to plug the books that you've written, because I want people to go check those out.
Oh, thank you, sir. The novel was actually my first novel, because for all those years of ghostwriting and journalism, I was doing novellas, which are shorter. They're under 30,000 words. But my first proper novel, which is, like between 200-300 pages, is Red Dennis, which actually touches on so much of what we've talked about. It's like, it's a straight white male that's radicalized, and he's on the left, and he goes from left to right. And, it calls up all the culture war stuff we've spent most of this time talking about. And then my book Ask Plus. Oh, you got it. Beautiful. Oh, it's funny because I looked away from the screen, then I looked down. I was like, oh, very nice. There he is. And
in all honesty, I have not read it yet, but
oh, cool. No. Let me know what you think. Well, let me tell you, it applies to what we've been talking about for like 2/3 of this in a huge way. So it's all about this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's I don't want to make it sound like it's like feeding the reader asparagus either, because it's fun. I mean, it's a thriller and it's suspenseful and all those things. And then there's Ask Plus Seat, which is the subtitle, if I can remember it properly, is 21 tips to stop procrastinating and finish your book or screenplay. So, and that book, because we've started doing digital marketing for my whole backlist of books, Ask Plus Seat is the most robust seller I've ever had as an author, and I've been doing it since 2002. And so I guess it speaks to something of people being home, wanting to work on projects, wanting to get into writing. And it's all just tips I've come up with over my career as a writer, just having to sit down and do it almost every day. So, and so that's a fun one too, and very, very personal, first nonfiction book I've done. And those are the two main ones. And of course, you got to check us out at the Milpitas Beat, milpitasbeat.com.
Milpitas Beat, I can't imagine there'd be many people watching this who don't know what that is. But
awesome, yeah.
They were the press saviors of Milpitas when we had no local journalism, and you guys, I've praised you guys since the beginning, and I will continue to do so unless you guys mess up really bad, which is very unlikely.
Thank you, I really appreciate it. And we wouldn't have grown without people like yourself who knew from the beginning that we were sincere and we were steady, and I appreciate it so much.
And if you look hard enough, you'll find some articles about me too.
Oh, you're in there. Actually, yeah, you're one of the characters. Yeah.
But actually, I'm one of the characters. Fun fact: me and Eric work together, but I don't think you've ever written an article about me before. I think it's been written by other people every time.
Yeah, it's funny. For a moment, I thought you were wrong because I edit every article. So I'm like, no, I've definitely been in front of the screen working with Tim Stan. I'm like, no, I don't think I've ever written one where you've been a factor. No, you're correct. I wrote one about the Planning Commission last year where I quoted you, I think, about Legoland. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That was the only time. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I remember when that was the most controversial thing we were working on.
Man, if only to be worried about Legoland right now. That's like another world. Gosh. Yeah.
Well, we had Legoland, which was like controversial, but also most people loved it, so it was okay.
Oh, and definitely. It was inevitable it would pass. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we got La Quinta Hotel, which was
we're still hearing still hearing the echoes of it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've never been harassed after a planning commission meeting, and like, the police came up to me and said, Commissioner Alcorn, we want to escort you out of the building because there are people there. Yeah. We heard your name. They're waiting for you in the lobby. And
they were incensed.
I had to be escorted out by police, which was what the. And fun fact, that same night I was followed home by car.
Oh, get out of here! Oh God,
I'm not going to say that it was someone from there. I'm not even, I can't even 100% confirm that I was being followed, but I did the following test where you make 4 right turns.
Yeah, okay.
To see if someone's following you or not.
Yeah.
You make 4 right turns because then you're kind of back going the direction you were, and those turns were pointless. And so no one just makes 4 right turns.
Right.
No one does
good.
That.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And so I was actually I've been trained in security and kind of takedown and reading body language. It was kind of like it was a similar course to a crash course of what the FBI gets trained on.
Nice.
And all that, and I was trained in that for security reasons because if I'm ever put into a situation, I want to know what I'm doing. But that's one thing they teach you.
I hear you. Yeah.
And I did the 4 right turns, and they followed me through the entire thing. And,
whoa, yeah, I don't think people understand.
It was on my way home from City Hall.
It's amazing. Like, I don't think I've never had an experience like that. Like, but Rhoda has had experiences where she's been photographed, which was very disturbing randomly. And I don't think people understand, unless you're in it, that local politics and local news gets people very emotional. And people get around the bend, and it's
the politics
shocking.
It's the politics that will actually affect somebody's day-to-day life.
That's right. Yeah,
why local politics is so important.
Oh, it is. You're not kidding. And the importance runs proportional to how emotional people get about it, which is a healthy thing in most cases. But then you have cases where people are following you home. So yeah.
I actually, interesting question. Is the Milpitas Beat going to endorse any candidates this year?
No. Yeah.
I kind of figured if you guys were, you probably would have done it by now.
Yeah. No, this particular, I mean, the mayoral race, and I love both candidates, but the mayoral race, the outlook is probably very predictable in terms of a Tran victory, and
that is so interesting to me. Like, people don't even want to challenge him anymore.
Oh, they want, because he runs the board so well, and he fights for it real hard. He wants it, probably wants it more than anybody. I mean, like, he goes out and gets it, and he's a tough opponent, so they stay away from him. And council is kind of like when you ran in 2018. I mean, there's one less. Like, I think you were in a race of 9. Now it's a race of 8, and it's very. I mean, it's hard. There's no. I mean, we could do polling and finance that and so forth, and take the reporting in that direction. But there's really no metric. I mean, you have a couple newcomers in there. You have a couple people who have tried before. One of the most interesting points of the race is Chua and Fan, because Fan defeated Chua in second place in 2016 by 300 votes. So I think in terms of newsy, wonky news, that's the pairing to watch, because they both obviously have similar overlapping Asian demographic appeal. And Fan had a pretty historic victory because of his young age. And he edged her out very slightly by a very low margin, just like Karina Dominguez did to Gary Barbadillo 2 years later. So those,
you're welcome,
but,
Karina.
Say it again.
I said, you're welcome, Karina.
Right. Yeah. No. And, so, I mean, aside from that,
that was a joke.
That's all. I don't think it doesn't bother me. But aside from that pairing, I don't know. Like, Siraj, I think, had a mid-range placement during your race. What was he in, 5th or 6th or something?
Something like that.
Yeah, and he's coming harder now with a campaign manager and more expenditures and a more of a professional touch to the campaign. So we'll see. But the city our only endorsement was Minno in the race against Ling Kong, and there was a certain in addition to having children in the school district, there was also there was a unique case because it was a special election and it called major costs into play, which ironically and incidentally, they don't repeat the costs now. It cancels itself out because now there's no school board race. So that worked itself out over the long term. But in general, I think over time you won't see the Beat endorse unless there's a moral component to it.
Yeah. This whole election thing is so interesting to watch, and I'm not going to make you comment on this because that's how you make your living, is commenting. No, but the candidates this year are so interesting because as a planning commissioner, I work with council time to time, and I've worked with Bob and I've worked with Anthony, and those are both outstanding guys. Anthony's come a long way. He had some drama with him before, but he's come a long way, and the thing is he offended someone a lot, but those two people are fine now. They work together now, and there's still some people when it comes to Anthony Fan who are just like, oh, why would I vote for someone who did this? And just like, look, if the person he did that to can forgive him, so can you. And obviously something changed for Rich to forgive him.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think they're both proud. I mean, they both just did. Our reporter Lloyd just did the piece about the tax increase, which Fan and Tran both worked on together. I think they were both proud to make the statement that they were together on it, as they should be, because that's hard. That is a hard human skill for anyone in any line of work or walk of life to come together with somebody who you despised at some point. And there was a lot of mutual antagonism between them for Tran's whole first term. And so they graduated out of that. And it's fascinating to watch. I mean, we just did the forum last night. It's actually our first of 4. I lost count, but there's 3 more. I thought there was only 2 more. And we're gonna be covering it a lot. And I think it's great. Tran even himself said something along these lines because he did an aftermath session on his own Facebook. it is just interesting on a visceral level to hear their voices, to see their faces, to look in their eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, all of that is so important. If you don't have a media, you can't get any of that. And I think a lot of people's micro orientation to the candidates, micro decisions come down to that. It's like, do I trust this person? Do they sound like they're lying? Like, and so to be able to bring that out is a lot of fun.
Well, and another interesting thing is, it's amazing how many people who are running right now that I either am working with or have worked with. You have the old vice chair of the planning commission, which I now sit in that seat.
Nice.
And you have like the sudden and abrupt removal of that, which is just like that in itself was just like a whole weird story.
It was,
just
yeah.
Because, it wasn't unmerited because her term was up, but it was a little bit, and that was, as someone who was a commissioner during that time, I do have a different insight into why that happened. But it was a big deal. There's a lot of drama.
Yeah. I would love. If you had Demetrius on the show, I would tune right in. Yeah, she'd be a great guest. Yeah.
And then you have Chua, who's there, who I currently work with on the commission right now. But even there's drama with that because our public comments have been insane recently.
Oh yeah, there's been a lot of stuff. Yeah, and possibly coming from inside the race, right? I mean, certain people are aligned to certain interests. Yeah.
It's very possible. And for everyone watching, please stop messaging me about that. Like, I understand. I know what you're saying. Please stop messaging me about that. I don't need to hear it anymore.
Yeah. I can't ask them to do the same. But I would say though, on all in school board too, and city council, and you can even say planning commission, even though it's not an elected post, it's an appointed post. It's still a very important body. I've felt, watching it pretty closely, and Rhoda educated me a lot in the first 6 months, and I always follow it, and I've become a bit of a junkie with the local stuff. I feel, number one, we have high quality people across the board. I genuinely believe that. Whatever my personal judgments might be about this person or that person, not only do I feel we have good quality people, we tend to in Milpitas in general, but also they're like, a lot of these posts are like glorified volunteerism, I think on school board and planning commission, you get a stipend, which is modest. There's not a monetary incentive that's really motivating you in a huge way. And in council, I think there's more of a component of health insurance. There's more of an actual base salary. So it's a bit more meaningful, but still
it's like $10,000 a year.
Yeah, exactly. In the economy we're in, it's not terribly meaningful. I mean, all of them have either they're retirees or they have jobs. And I think that speaks to the type of people that pursue the posts. And, it also speaks to the ethics Rhoda and I choose with which to approach them. Because if you guys are fat cats sitting up there making $275,000 a year, you're cushioned and you better damn earn it, sort of thing. Like there's more of a watchdog bark will happen. But since there's more, because of the structure of the city, it's more of it is like a rung above volunteerism. We take that into account. Also, it's only 13 square miles, and we like to talk to all of you. We like the access. We need the access. Our readers need the access. So we can't swing real hard and dig up dirt for no reason. We always have to tell both sides of the story. And there is a certain contingent of readers that want us to just be like, I won't name other papers, you can probably guess, but be like constantly reporting scandal and brutalizing and just like always throwing them under the bus. But you could craft stories that way. But just like the later session of the Milpitas Post before its ownership changed, City Hall wasn't even talking to them. I mean, there was like a blackout between City Hall and the press, and that's the risk you take when you sling dirt. That doesn't mean we hide dirt or we sanitize, because we never have once, but you have to sort of remain impassive, and this is one side, this is the other side. It's ultimately up to the people and the voters to decide, and it's an ongoing learning process also.
Yeah. You in my opinion, you guys have always been pretty fair.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I'll never agree with anyone or any organization 100%, but you guys have been pretty fair.
I appreciate it. And you know what?
That's a common thing I say. I've said that like 100 times on this podcast, I think, is that I don't agree with everyone.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, and I think that is high. I think that is high marks too. That's sane too, in the sense that we do run letters to the editor. We do run editorials, you know, and all of that is right-brained. I mean, it's opinion. It's a rumination. So it lives in a different spot than reporting. And people, you know, we want to remain stimulating and spur conversations. So in a way, it would work. It would mean if we were 100% agreeable to everybody, it would mean we were soft and bland and toothless, and we just like we never, you know, we never had anything to say. We were just reporting on community events. But that's not where we want our pendulum to go either. To use your words.
Well, you know, one thing I like about you guys is like if you were to write a nasty article about me, one, I'd probably deserve it at that point.
Oh, thank you.
But if you guys did, I would have the opportunity to send in a letter to the editor in response to that article and be like, no, you guys are full of crap.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're saying this because I want to say this loud and clear. Like, we love doing that. That's what we're here for. Yeah. That is what we're here for. You can disagree with us in our comment section on Facebook, in our comment section on the site. You can write an op-ed. You can write a letter to the editor. We will never bury it or like we will never be the last stop or the dead end of the dialogue ever. I mean, you can and Rhoda and I individually, as a couple, as an entity, have taken so much criticism, fact checking. I mean, it's just it becomes part of the job. So. I mean, it's the way it works. It's the way it should work because it's a free speech organization. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna cut this off for a second time.
Sure. Okay, that was good talking to you, buddy.
But I want to. Can I plug our project?
Oh, please. Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah. Like, just when you said that, I was like, don't not plug yourself, but plug whatever. You got.
Yeah. So me and Eric have been working on a project together for a long time.
About a year. Yeah.
It was kind of it would have been faster, but I feel like COVID slowed it way down. But it's called Dish Pig. It's a very so I'm the lead editor on the film, and I was also kind of like a script supervisor, kind of.
Yeah, you did everything. Shooting. I mean, you did editor, script supervisor, you did sound, you and your partner Kevin Galgus did sound, color correction. You did the credits. I mean, you were extraordinary resource.
Everything in post. Yeah. Everything in post. Either me and my business partner did. But even on set, I was supervising sound. Kevin was the sound operator. I was doing some script supervision and also post edit suggestions during shooting, just to kind of make sure everything went smoothly. And by the way, that really paid off. I know that was kind of a made up position, but it really paid off.
Oh no, it really did. I was so glad it was such a source of comfort while we were working on it that you were doing that. You took that upon yourself voluntarily too, and also brought so much creativity across all the things you're listing. Like I said earlier in the interview, like I always want, my approach to directing is to first and foremost bring good people in. Secondly, I want spontaneity, creativity. It's definitely not an authoritarian setup. Quite the contrary. And I thought your editing was awesome. Your sound work. You did the sound mix too. We didn't even say the words. I mean,
yeah.
So we're excited to share
mix,
it.
color grading, credits, editing, everything. Yeah,
Mr. Alcorn is equipped for anyone who's listening to make movies. He's got all the tools. Yeah. Yeah,
I got amazing people around me too, and me and you are actually working on something. There's an idea that's it's one step above an idea.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking more about it. Yeah. So and I think there's more where all that came from. Yeah.
Yeah, but so we don't have any dates for Dish Pig yet, but it will be
next couple weeks.
Yeah, it'll all be coming soon, very soon. So keep an eye out. But anyways, excellent. It was great talking to you, Eric.
Likewise, thank you, buddy.
I want you back on the show, in the near future.
Oh, say when. Just anytime. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, for sure. All right, take it easy.
Okay, talk to you later.